Welcome back to a Pollock Academy minisode, where I'm going to talk about the massive resistance movement in Virginia. Massive resistance was the effort and actions put in place to maintain segregationist practices in public education after the Supreme Court ruled that segregation in schools was unconstitutional in Brown versus the Board of Education. A lot of this revolves around the actions of Senator Harry F. Byrd, Governor Thomas B. Stanley, and Attorney General, soon-to-be Governor J. Lindsey Almond, who ran on a platform of massive resistance as seen here.
There is no more emergency in Virginia now than there was on May the 17th, 1954, when the Supreme Court handed down its decision. We have been in this emergency ever since that time. And I have been one of your public servants who has fought throughout that time to prevent the mixing of the races in the public schools. And up to this moment, there is no mixing of the races in the public schools of Virginia, and there is no turmoil, no confusion, no chaos as a result of that.
Yikes.
Remember, protests and the fight for equality in public education is not new. We saw Roberts versus the City of Boston in 1849 and Lum versus Rice in 1927, where these cases actually upheld segregation in public schools for African Americans and those of Chinese descent. And in 1954, after the landmark court case of Brown versus the Board of Education, schools in the United States were to integrate. But in southern states, and in this case Virginia, sought to defy the order and maintain segregation. And nationally, integration was moving at a snail's pace. In 1957, America witnessed the U.S. military and the Arkansas National Guard protect 9 black students entering class at Little Rock Central High School. And in Virginia, I guess the idea was to do the opposite. 96 politicians in southern states, including Virginia's Harry F. Byrd, signed the Southern Manifesto of 1956, condemning the previous year's verdict of Brown versus the Board of Education. That same year, Virginia Governor Thomas B. Stanley drafted a set of statutes for Virginia to follow, known as the Stanley Plan, which would allow for a massive resistance to integration, with laws that stated things like, if integration occurred, the governor could close a school if he wanted to. The governor could withhold state funding from public education. The governor could investigate individual black students who are applying to formerly all-white schools. And the governor could prosecute local officials who voluntarily integrated their school system. And spoiler alert, Thomas B. Stanley and his successor, Lindsey Almond, lost every court case against them, including 2 in Hampton Roads, and were told repeatedly to integrate schools, but nonetheless, they were successful in closing schools in Charlottesville, Norfolk, Prince Edward, and other places in Virginia. Finally, in 1959, Governor Almond said that he could fight the court decision no longer and allow schools to integrate. And that school year, we see groups of African American students, like the Norfolk 17, the Arlington 4, and the Charlottesville 12, making their mark in history. This was seemingly the end of a massive resistance and the start of a passive resistance to school desegregation, as more actions were brought about to maintain a semblance of segregation in Virginia. For example, many non-profit, non-sectarian private schools were started as segregation academies for white students, and these were partially funded by the state. Many are still in operation today. Also, moving to suburban areas and redlining are just some of the factors that hindered the desegregation process in Virginia. Since 2020, massive resistance in Virginia has made the news, with many commemorations and Virginia historic highway markers honoring these groups. I'll mention 2 for this video. First, in 2023, an 8-foot by 60-foot monument titled End of Massive Resistance was unveiled in Flatiron Park in downtown Norfolk. This art installation starts with a brick wall and moves right as it exposes the iconic image of the Norfolk 17, just before their integration of the city schools. One of the surviving Norfolk 17, Lolita Portis, was on site for the dedication to the monument. And at the start of the new year in 2024, one of the newest Virginia highway historic markers was dedicated at Virginia Western Community College in Roanoke, Virginia. And this historic marker has a massive resistance connection. See, we have to go back to the political actions of Byrd, Stanley, and Almond during Virginia's closing of schools during this massive resistance time. And we're going to see that closing of schools is going to have a ripple effect. During the 1950s and 60s, Virginia leaders saw new investments move to other states like North Carolina, and corporations began avoiding setting up shop in states with an untrained workforce, a lack of focus on education, and confrontational politics. Turns out massive resistance was bad for business. Business leaders then recommended a system to affordably train and to offer education to the Virginia workforce during the massive resistance years to make up for lost time. And out of that, Virginia's expansive network of technical and community college education was born. Thanks for listening to Pollock Academy, Massive Resistance in Virginia.